Good morning. My name is Philip Elbaum. I'm a social work clinical manager at Hines Veterans Administration Hospital. We're very pleased and honored to have with us Mr. Wilfred Ruff, who is a former prisoner of war from the Korean conflict. This is the former POW Living History Project. This is October 5th in the year 2000. Mr. Ruff, could you please tell us how old you are?
I'm 74 years old, sir.
74 years old. Mm-hmm. And are you service connected?
Yes, I am, 100%.
100% service connected. Okay. And could you tell us what branch of service you were in?
Well, during the Second World War, I put 3 years in the Navy, United States Navy, and then in the Korean War, I joined the Army, so I spent 7 years in the service, in the Army.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And between World War II and Korea, what type of work did you do?
Well, I was Navy, you mean...
were you in the service continuously? Or
no, I had a break of 5 years in that after I got out of the United States Navy.
And what type of work did you do?
I was an electrician.
Electrician.
Mm-hmm.
And in World War II, what type of experience did you have in the Navy? Were you in a combat position?
Yes, I was. I was a Navy gunner aboard of merchant ships and had a tour of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific.
Okay. And then you re-enlisted in the Army, and what year was that?
That was in 1950, October of 50.
1950. And how old were you when you re-enlisted about?
24 years old, about.
24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And could you tell us how long were you in the Army in Korea prior to being captured?
I was in about 5 months.
5 months.
Uh-huh.
And could you tell us your experience in the Army prior to being captured? What was your unit and what did you do?
I was a machine gunner in the 2nd Division, Heavy Weapons Company, Dog Company, 38.
And what did you do, what sort of experiences did you have in Korea prior to your capture?
Well, we was on a push in March of 1951, and we were trying to rout the Chinese and the North Koreans, and we set up a line, defensive line, after about a month of trying to rout them out, and there we stayed until we were ordered to retreat.
And could you tell us the circumstances, how you were captured, and a little bit about that?
Well, we were on the line. I was a machine gunner, and I had caught a Chinese patrol coming through our lines, and I opened up on them, stopped them from coming through the gap in our side of the line, and then a while later, the United Nations troops start filling through our lines, and was on a massive retreat. And my division was the last one to hold ground. I was ordered to stay behind and give cover, being a machine gunner. And second lieutenant and myself were there all by ourselves to give cover for the troops that were retreating. After a while, we had to try to get up a hill that some the troops were stranded on and surrounded by. We couldn't get up the hill because we were bombarded by rifles, fire, and grenades. So as a group of us tried to get through a gully, that's when we were surrounded by the Chinese, and we were captured that day.
And tell us how you were captured. What did they say? What did you do?
Well, I was wounded. We didn't get a few other chaps that were with me that were wounded too, and we had no medical attendants there. They were worse off than we were. They took us through their lines after the capture, about 30 of us. And then we joined a couple hundred more that were caught as prisoners of war during that time. We marched for 40 days, 40 nights. And by the middle of the march, we had 600 men, around 600 men on the march to go to a camp that
600 out of 2,000 survived?
Yes, 600
What were the conditions?
captured.
What were the conditions on this march? What was the weather like, and what were
Well, it was in May. The weather was good. It didn't rain much, and it wasn't cold, even if it was up in North Korea. But the marching took a toll on us men because we were starving. A lot of us were wounded. A lot of us were sick from dysentery, disease, and no medical care. And a few were even shot that dropped from the line.
Did you witness any of these atrocities?
No, I didn't witness them personally, but I heard the shots in the rear. And then we could hear down the line that some of the men were shot when they fell off to the side of the road. I myself did not witness this, but I heard the shots, and I heard later on that some of the men were shot that couldn't make it.
Were you given any food on this march?
Meager rations. Were sorghum, millet, and soybeans, dried soybean powder that we mixed with a little water. And that was our rations. A lot of us had wounds that festered, and maggots got in our sores, and some of us were too weak to even pick them out. Some of them died from blood poisoning. And by the time we got to the camp 40 days later, we had lost almost half of our men.
Half of the men died.
Yes, sir.
That must have been a very horrible experience.
It was.
And after you got to the camp, could you tell us the conditions and what happened there?
Oh, the conditions were very poor. We were stationed out alongside of a road in Korean huts. It's a small village where their supply lines used to run through. And at night, sometimes we'd get bombed and strafed by our own planes. Being a communist country, they didn't believe in the Geneva Treaty, so they wouldn't mark the huts at all, the roofs or anything, to mark them as POWs. So their supply lines came close to our huts, and in that respect we were strafed and bombed at night. We had no medical care for the first few months, but watered down iodine and opium pills, what the Chinese used regularly. And we were burying quite a few every day up in the hills along our camps. And what I heard later on, that all the camps were burying, every day they'd bury 2, 3, 4, 5 men up there for at least months, for a couple of months, and then that really rose to a big amount, you know, where we lost our men. As we got rid of our festers, sores, and we started to pick up a little more weight. I myself went down to 90 pounds. And I was 180 when I went in. And if I hadn't have been fit as I was, I probably wouldn't have survived. But I did, and so did a lot of other ones, young men that did it.
How long were you in this camp?
We were in about 6 months. 6 months in this camp.
And how did you survive in the camp? What was, how did you cope with all this?
Well, being a little older than the rest of the men that were captured, in fact, I was 24 going on 25, they called me Pops, because most of them were 18, 19. I didn't even know we had a 15-year-old man in the Army that was captured. He was one of the youngest men captured, 15 years old. He was a Southern boy. After we got fit and started to put a little weight on, and our sores went away, and Medical care got a little better. They start indoctrinating us with communist propaganda. They made us attend classes every day, 7 days a week, from 5:30 in the morning on
How long were you required to be in class? From 5:30 to what time?
till maybe 7, 8 in the morning. And then we'd have classes in the afternoon. And that's when I became a reactionary. Being a little older than the rest of the men, I knew that what their aim was, that the survivors of this camp and the other camps were good picking for the communists, so I became a reactionary.
When you say a reactionary, could you tell us what that means, Mr. Ruff?
Well, I went and took pensions around to the men. I asked them to sign it for better food and medical purposes, because the peace talks had started then. And men were still dying, but not as frequently as when we first arrived at the camp. As for medical care, better food and no indoctrination. Well, I became a threat to the Chinese, and it took me away at night one time, beat me, and then put me in a wooden box, dropped me in a hole in the ground, and covered me up with mats. There I spent the next 8 months.
You were essentially put in the ground for 8 months.
Yes, sir.
How did you survive that? Sounds horrible.
It does. It was. If you let your mind get away with you, it would be. I tried everything, the singing, whistling, thinking at home, and other things to keep my mind occupied. I had little pet moles that came out of the ground, and I would feed them a little bit of my sorghum that I got, 1 bowl of sorghum a day. I wasn't fed like the other prisoners. As I found out later, I was fed the same thing as when I was captured, sorghum. I'd have 1 bowl of that, and I'd be let out at nighttime to urinate, defecate. And then I'd go back to my box again.
How long would they let you out for?
Just enough time to complete my
Nature's call.
nature's call.
So you were in this box for 8 months
Yes, sir.
and let out for 10 minutes a night, or?
Yes, 10 minutes a night. I was made to sit at attention with my legs crossed and my arms crossed from morning, daybreak, till evening when it got dark. If I dozed off and they would catch me, they would take long poles and get on top of the cage and beat me until I woke up or stood at attention with my arms.
Was there any light coming in during this time?
Yes, it was light coming through the open door. They had an open door. It was in a Korean kitchen, and the kitchen is below ground, and it was in a hole that was dug for me in the box, and I could hear other men screaming and in the distance, and I knew that they were in the same predicament that I was in this box. I was taken out frequently to confess my sins, so to speak, to admit that I was a warmonger, and that I believed in what the communists said, and I refused to do that, and so they beat me more and put me in a box.
If you would agree with them, they would have left you out?
They probably would have let me out. I don't know for sure.
Sounds like a really horrible experience.
It is.
And what happened after you were let out of this box?
Well, we were taken out one night, as usual, so the other prisoners of war wouldn't know about it. And the group of us were put on a truck. 21 of us. They called us extreme reactionaries against the Chinese People's Volunteers. We were taken to another camp. Outside this camp, we were put in a stockade. 1 room, 15 by 15, 1 door, no windows, and all 15 of us were in this room for months after that. Fed our rations through the open door. We're allowed to bathe once or twice in the time we were prisoners. They gave us DDT powder to try to get rid of the body lice, which was impossible to get rid of. From there, they separated a few of us and took us up towards North Korea, towards the Yellow River. And we spent the rest of that time until the war ended.
And how long were you totally a prisoner?
I was prisoner almost a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Out of 28 months, yeah.
And as you look back, how do you think you survived? I mean, you went through some horrible experiences. How do you think you survived?
It's almost hard to say. It's just that if you train your mind to think of what to do psychologically, I would say that just don't think of the predicament you're in, and don't let your mind wander off. Think of something else, and that's what I've done. I had a little scrap of a pencil, and I wrote names down and pictures on the slats of the wooden box that I was in, and try to keep myself busy. My mind busy, at least. I couldn't do it physically, but I had to keep my mind busy.
I see. And could you tell us about when you were liberated?
Well, we were liberated was towards the last. The ones that were given the Chinese the problems were liberated, were released towards the end. It was around September, the beginning of September. And we were given a quick physical. They had me down as extreme, unnourished, soldier. And they put me aboard ship, sent me home to San Francisco.
When you were you liberated by the Americans, or did you have to go to a certain place?
Through the Americans, by the Americans. And
you had to go through the 38th parallel?
Through the, Pullman John.
Pullman John?
Pullman John. Freedom Village, they called it at that time. I didn't have much to look at because it was late in the day, and we were one of the last prisoners to be repatriated.
You recall your feeling at that time?
Well, I was kind of mad at the Army because I didn't get any medical treatment right away. They fed me food that I couldn't keep in my stomach because I was malnutrition. I had
you hadn't eaten
bad
in 18 months.
Right. They haven't eaten rich food at all. And I was kind of mad at the service for that, for the way they treated me. And when I arrived in the San Francisco, the ship arrived there aboard a troop ship, and we were given money and 30 days leave.
Was there any sort of debriefing process? Did you?
Well, yes, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt. They told me to be quiet about my experiences. Not to say anything. I was going to tell them that I seen Russian soldiers manning anti-aircraft guns, missiles, that shoot our own planes down. And they said, don't worry about it, don't say anything about it. Just keep your mouth shut about your experiences. Well, at that time I didn't know they had FBI files on me. Until 8 years ago, it was released. And I sent for into Washington, sent for my FBI files were about 250 pages deep on my experiences as a prisoner of war and other prisoners. When I returned home, shortly after I got out of the Army, I was interrogated by the FBI approximately 3 times, interrogated and asked if I knew any names that were possible communist sympathizers. And being in the situation I was, I couldn't give any names because I only remember the 21 names that I was with in solitary confinement.
Did you get any sort of opportunity to talk to mental health people, social workers, doctors, or anybody?
No, sir, I didn't.
The Army did not offer you
No,
that?
no, that's what I was very mad about the situation.
So this FBI stuff must have been additional pressure after you went through all the stuff that you
It sure was, you know, and like I said, they were trying to find out possible communist sympathizers, and I didn't know of any, being in the group that I was in, and I was, I guess, when I read my files, I was under suspicion that I wasn't telling all the information that I knew, and they had information about what other people had talked about me, and the only good thing that come out of it, that I was recommended for accommodation, and I was awarded this Bronze Star for my part in resisting the Chinese communists.
And then what happened? How long were you in the service after your repatriation?
I took one more hitch.
You enlisted again after all this?
Yes, sir, I did. And I became a sergeant, and lo and behold, they put me in the stockade to guard other prisoners of war, which prisoners rather, but that I didn't want to associate with, you know, on that, because...
That's the Army's infinite wisdom, isn't it?
Yes. Say that again.
And you were in the service how much longer?
I was 3 years then.
And you were discharged in what year?
57, sir.
57.
Mm-hmm.
And what type of work did you do after you were discharged?
I went back into electrical work and became in construction, iron and electrical engineering.
I see. And when did you retire?
I retired when I was 57 years old. I'm 74 now.
So that's
80 something, I believe.
okay. And how long have you been married?
I've been married 47 years.
47 years. We're very pleased to have your wife here with us too. Maybe you could get a little shot of her, Jerry. And in terms of your marriages, how many kids do you have?
Well, this is a funny part I'm going to have to tell you about. This when the Chinese interrogated me, we had one instructor that was educated in Shanghai, and he was very good at English, very fluent at English. And he'd shake his finger at me and he said, we know that, Wilfred, you are the only child in your family. And if anything happens to you, there will be no more Ruffs. And I thought it was kind of funny, but it was his way of threatening me to behave myself. I didn't think much of it at that time, but he had found out from other prisoners that what my childhood was like, because we always told each other our lives and our families that we had in the past. And when I got back home, I married my sweetheart that I knew before I went into service. And now we have 5 children, 8 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild.
That's wonderful. And do your children and grandchildren know about what an American hero you are? I know you don't like the word hero, but do they know about your experiences?
Yes, sir, they do. The older ones always ask me questions about the Korean War and the Second World War. And at times we go to high schools in Cary, Illinois, and we tell them our experiences from the Second World War and from the Korean War about POWs.
How do you think that your POW experiences have affected you throughout your life?
Well, it's made me appreciate life a lot more. Like I say, if you're given a second chance, you try to straighten your life out a little better than when you had it before. That's my theory, and I believe in it, that if you're pressured at any time in life, get out of it, get out of the environment, and just take care of yourself and do a good job for the rest of your life.
You think about these experiences, do they trouble you at times?
Fortunately, no. No, I haven't had no nightmares or anything. But I did when I got out of the Second World War. I had a few nightmares then. But I didn't have it from the experience as a POW.
Have you used VA services, Mr. Ruff?
Yes, sir, I have. In North Chicago, I go up there continuously for heart problems and arthritis due to my internment in Korea.
And have you ever had any treatment for PTSD?
None. No, sir. No.
None. Okay, is there anything else you want to tell us, share with us that would help you, other people that listen to this, understand what you went through and to learn a lesson from your experiences?
Well, all I can say is I hate to wave the flag and everything, but this is the greatest country in the world. I've been around most of it, and in 2 wars. If I had to fight for it again, I'd do the same thing again, because this is no better country than what we have here, and people should start appreciating it and stop destroying it.
Okay, thank you again very much for coming. It's been an honor to have you, sir.
Yeah. I hope I done all right.
You did excellent. You did okay. And this videotape is something that certainly you can use when you go around educating people about the experiences that you had.
Well, there's a lot I let out and everything like that that I say differently to the children because it's a little, I don't talk about the real bad things that happen to us, you know.
Okay, thank you again.
Okay, my pleasure.